Dang, I guess Costco's prices are so low that people even still use it in the apocalypse. Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the Season 2 finale of The Last of Us, this episode titled Convergence. There's a couple things that I want to discuss, especially their one major change that they made from the video game towards the end there that I'll sort of flag when we get there. But on the whole, I found this finale to be fine, especially considering I'm someone who's played the games and I knew what the kind of sort of twist cliffhanger ending was likely going to be. So I wasn't particularly shocked by that, and in fact, I'd actually be curious to see the reaction of people who have not played the game, what they thought of this ending. But on the whole, I thought this was just, it kind of all led up to what I expected and the emotional beats that I expected. Even removing my sort of awareness of what was happening plot-wise from the game, I'm like, yeah, this kind of feels like where it's going, and it's done decently well enough, but neither is it like above and beyond, especially in comparison to last week, because last week really was a series high. I think the only other episode other than last week that I liked better than that episode was season 1 episode with the big gay episode, I'll call it, just to make it clear. But outside of that one, I thought last week's episode was phenomenal. And this one just kind of goes back to being, yeah, this is okay, but didn't knock my socks off. And it kind of just solidifies my feelings about the season as a whole that I'll talk about towards the end. But let me get into a little bit of specifics here. My first major thing that I do want to clock, though, is I don't understand, really, the cuts to Isaac and the WLF, especially considering how little we got of them this season, and even more especially given where this episode ends off. And I'm gonna, full spoilers, by the way, if you have not seen the episode, I'm just gonna go full spoilers. I won't spoil anything game stuff related, at least not any future game spoilers down the line, but just spoilers for the episode if you have not seen it. But especially given that we get that ending this episode where it's revealed, like, okay, we're gonna be seeing Abby's story going into next season and her perspective on these 3 days in Seattle, it feels even weirder to me that we're getting these cuts into Isaac. And to a degree, I understand it. Like, you have Jeffrey Wright. You want to use Jeffrey Wright because it's Jeffrey frickin' Wright. He's amazing, and he's great in every scene. And, you know, the scene with him is ultimately fine as well. We sort of, and I get the kind of narrative purpose. It's like setting up like, oh, Abby's kind of important to this guy. She's missing, and Isaac wants to find her. And you know, she's so important to this group that she could be the, you know, future leader of it. But that just feels like information that doesn't need to be here, and almost feels like it's just it just sort of dangles there in the ether of this episode. And again, I get like it's probably there to give a little bit of like, ooh, what's been going on with Abby, like these little insights into what Abby's side of things are that people will sort of nibble on until next season. But I even feel like those would be even more effective if people hadn't, if a game didn't exist and people could literally just find out. Like, you know, so there is that element of it. But even beyond that, because I know not everyone's going to play the game, they'll just take what the show is giving them. It still just feels a little weird to be like, all right, we're going to cut in and see a little bit of what Isaac's up to, this guy who we don't have any kind of emotional tether to really in any strong way, and just sort of pop in for these scenes. And we've had a couple of them over the past few episodes, and like the first one with Isaac was really great because it worked within its own structure, right? Like the scene with like, okay, we're getting this little moment with these Fedra guys that, and you know, he betrays them and stuff like that. Like that worked because it was a kind of self-contained, interesting scene. Even the one a few episodes ago, it wasn't Isaac, but it was a second in command talking about like the stuff underneath the hospital, again, kind of worked as its own self-contained scene to a degree that tied into the episode. But here, this doesn't feel like it ties much into the episode at all, other than like Abby's somewhere, which we kind of already knew Abby was gonna be somewhere. We know she's somewhere. but it just sort of cuts in and it doesn't really flow or relate to anything emotional that's going on. Honestly, the stuff with Mel and Owen where Ellie sort of comes upon them at the end of the episode works better because you get like a sense of like Abby's missing, we don't know where she is, they're frustrated by it, but we're overhearing it from Ellie's perspective. So it's like, okay, Ellie's trying to figure out where Abby is, and she's gleaning little bits of information as she listens. And that kind of puts us more in Ellie's perspective even more than these random scenes that pop out. So yeah, it didn't really land for me, and I'm not entirely sure. I can get why they decided to, but I just don't think it was really strong reason to do that. The rest of this was all very solid. I actually really like Jessie in this episode. You know, I've enjoyed him throughout the season. Sad to see him kick him at the end. I always, even in the game, that moment was really devastating, and it honestly becomes even more devastating in live action here. And it works really well considering how much characterization we get for him throughout the episode, and him leveling this sort of like you're being selfish idea at Ellie, him flaming it through the idea of like community versus self. His argument's kind of a little silly, right? Because he's like, oh, well, I chose not to go with him because I was choosing my community. And it's a little weird to me because he sort of says, well, if I went with them, how would have saved you? And it's like, well, I can make the argument back, like, who didn't you save because you didn't go off to Mexico? You don't know. You can never know that. So, like, you're not, it feels like it feels like a weird argument to make for, oh, I chose my community over myself. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I get the framing. It's just a weird argument. That being said, the ways that he delivers this and the way he points out to Ellie, like, you are being selfish being here, and that it relates to Joel, right? It's the same exact thing that Joel did, like choosing his own emotions over the emotions of like what Ellie would want or what other people would want at all times. So you know, you can see that continuance of that in Ellie here, and her sort of response of like, oh yeah, I only ever saw really Joel as my community and he died, and you would have made the same choices as me. Maybe you know, she may or may not be right or wrong there, but it showcases her perspective, right? Like, she doesn't necessarily feel connected to these people, even though she's been living there for a long time. And she sort of still thinks with that, like, I gotta protect myself mindset, that places her sort of survival needs and her emotional needs first over others, which is just a fascinating little peek into her psychology that I like as like a subtle connection to Joel, in a really, really good way that works well, having built off of last week's episode. The rest of this, I think, was interesting. We got Ellie sort of disassociating a little bit, being like it was easy to kill Nora, and Dina sort of having conflicting feelings about that, but still sort of being on her side, but saying like, hey, we need to go after, you know, Ellie says like, you know, they you know, I know what Joel did and all of that jazz. So like the emotional Dina, I have to honestly say Dina is the MVP of this. Like, Pedro Pascal killed it last week's episode, but Dina's been killing it all season, like MVP of the season by a long shot. And so I really enjoy her acting. And then we ultimately get to the big thing at the end of the episode, which is Ellie coming across, like abandoning Jessie, we get like a couple little action beats with like her getting caught by the scars and then like running over to the aquarium. I was sort of like, okay, fine, not a big deal. It wasn't really, it was like just more of the scars being scars. You know what I mean? Like, ooh, look, they're a cult. The scene though with Owen and Mel and Ellie shooting Mel accidentally after Owen sort of jumps at her is interesting because, and it's a spoiler for the game, but like not of any future things. It's just a difference from the game. In the game, if I recall, Mel is the one that jumps at Ellie, and Ellie just straight up kills her and then learns afterwards that she's pregnant. But like Mel was, it was part of the instigation of like jumping at Ellie after, you know, Ellie already had a gun on them. So, and then Ellie kills her without, like, just not in self-defense, because Ellie was the one who instigated the pulling the gun, but, like, in retaliation for her instigating it. Here, it's an accident. And, you know, there's a part of me that feels like, they're pulling back a little bit on how dark Ellie can be. we've just saw last episode that like Ellie is going too far, and then in the game it kind of continues, like she's being very brutal, not hesitating to kill anybody, and yet in the game she's not hesitating to kill anybody, she just straight up kills them. And then, oh no, there was a baby involved. And it kind of relates, obviously, to Dina. And like, look, you killed the Dina of this side of Abby's life. How would you feel about that? And that's complicated. Here, it's done more accidentally, so it kind of takes away Ellie's agency in that. But I frankly kind of think it works. I've been against, I've not been a huge fan of all the changes this season, but I actually kind of think this one works a little bit better, mostly because in the game, we're mowing down tons of people, right? Like they are killing a ton of people throughout the entirety of the season, or entirety of the game, because that's the gameplay. You're killing a lot of people. So it kind of makes sense that Ellie wouldn't hesitate to stab someone very quickly in the game. And then learn later, like, oh, she was pregnant. Like, it would make sense to me that she would have no compunctions about that in the moment. Whereas Ellie hasn't been on a murderous rampage of, guards and stuff from the game. There's been a lot smaller body count for her. So on that front, it makes a lot of sense for me that it would be more of an accident. It still kind of gets to the same point, but it weighs more on Ellie than it would in the game necessarily, especially as an accident. So it works for me. This is a change that I think kind of works smartly considering the change of medium. But I'd be curious to hear other people's thoughts on it as well. But I think it lands for me, and it actually was a really big gut punch, especially as she as Mel is losing blood, and you can tell that like she's not even really cognizant of what's happening as Ellie's trying to save the baby. It was that sort of stuff always just like I'm not a big screamer. I'm not a person who gets squeamish very easily, but when you see people losing cognitive function, like you just get a sense of like how their brain is shutting off. That always kind of gets me. I think like probably the worst example of this, if you ever seen Pantheon, which is a fantastic show. If you have not seen Pantheon, go watch Pantheon. I watched it before it was cool, before it was even on Netflix. I watched it on AMC Plus because I was a true fan. But yeah, go watch it. It's a fantastic show. It's 2 seasons, well worth your time. It tells a complete story in those 2 seasons. It's very good. But there is a scene in I think it's second episode that is a very similar in a much more brutal fashion of like someone losing their cognitive functions. If you've seen the show, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about. But yeah, that sort of stuff like always gets me. So that landed really well for me. And then we get the end reveal that we're gonna be switching over to Abby, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but yeah, that seems like a natural place to go for where we're going to the story. I can't help but feel it would land even more interestingly if we didn't know Abby's backstory fully by the end of the season. But I mean, I've already had that conversation a billion times. I'll reiterate it slightly here. I still kind of feel like it would have been better to not know Abby's motivations at all, so that this twist would be a big sort of like, oh, wow, interesting thing, and then we get into it in the beginning of next season from Abby's perspective. I think that would have been much more interesting, but also could have, I'm going to be very curious, honestly, to see how season 3 goes for people, because if you're going to be focusing on Abby for most of the beginning half of season 3, if not longer, I could easily see people jumping ship on that show, being like, all right, we don't even have Pedro Pascal anymore, and then we're not even focusing on Ellie for a significant chunk of time. So maybe that's what they're kind of thinking about, like, is like, all right, we need to do that so like people have some investment in Abby when we get there. That being said, though, I still feel like it would be stronger, but I think let me put it this way: I still feel like it would have been stronger to not tell Abby's backstory. And also, I feel like you're going to have that problem regardless. Like, I feel like that problem's going to exist even with people knowing Abby's backstory. So they're still not going to be all fully on board on Abby. But I think the people have been even slightly more intrigued to be like, all right, let me learn a little bit more about Abby. But now we kind of already know a lot about Abby. We've even seen a lot of what's going on with Isaac as well. So it feels like you've negated some of the interesting narrative twists there while also not hedging off the major hurdle you're going to have. And ultimately, that's just kind of my thing with that part of it. I've already said my piece on it, but I'm curious to see how it's going to go. Ultimately, at the end of the day, two things that I will say is there's been some talk that Craig Mazin says he wants to do a season 4, like he doesn't think they can tell the rest of the story in 3 seasons, which is weird to me because I feel you could. Maybe you could extend it out. There's ways you could, but I honestly feel like you could do day 1, day 2, day 3 of Seattle, and then the rest of that game story. I won't spoil, but what goes on from there in a season. And given that you're going to be really putting a lot of weight on Abby at the beginning of next season, it seems like I'm skeptical of them earning a season 4. Just even in viewership. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it'll be fine. I don't know. But I feel like you're going to see a drop in viewership in season 3, and it's not going to earn that season 4 unless they've already gotten renewed for it. But I don't know if they have. So it just feels like it's unnecessary. And it feels like, especially because we're going to have to wait so long. We're going to have to probably wait 2 years again between this and next season. And just feels like a long time to wait, and then an even longer time to wait for like another season of the story that I feel like you can tell in a season. I'm very skeptical of a 4th season of this show. I feel like you tell it in 3. That seems good stopping point for me. And then if they ever do a Last of Us Part 3, do that. But yeah, I really don't see the need for 4 seasons. And I really feel like they're going to be struggling to keep people's attention at the beginning of next season, just be the way it breaks out. I'm curious enough, but I just feel like it's going to be a big uphill battle to have people invest in 2 more seasons. Whereas in a game, like, yes, when we jump over to Abby, it's sort of harder, but it's like I can play the rest of that story right now. I can go into it and play it, as opposed to a show where I'm gonna have to wait 2 years between seasons. That feels like it's gonna be a harder ask for a lot of people to get sort of reignite their interest in the story. So yeah, curious to see how that's all gonna play out at the end. I'll be here for it for that season. But I'll be curious to see how many other people are here for it. I'd be curious at what you all think. And yeah, just kind of giving overall thoughts on the season. There were some highs this season that I really did like, and I think there were some really good moments that this adaptation sort of hit that I really, really liked. I think especially last week's episode was phenomenal and almost worth the price of admission of the season alone. So there is that. I won't say oh, the season was terrible. Like last week's episode, fantastic. There are other bits and pieces throughout this season that I thought were really, really good. But on the whole, I struggle with some of the adaptational choices. I struggle with some of the structure, especially that like jumping over to Isaac stuff. I struggle with just some of the just the difference in character, the slight difference in characterization of people like Ellie. And I struggle to just get invested as much. And I guess that's ultimately what I feel is like outside of last week's episode, I haven't felt fully really invested in this season as much as I was in the game. And I am a defender of the game. So I need to go back and replay it because there's a part of me that's wondering, it's like, maybe these are just problems that I like didn't see in the game that I'm just seeing now. Maybe I'm older, different perspective, different time, who knows? Or if it really is a difference in the game. So I need to go back and replay and kind of see what I feel about it. Cause I remember being a defender of the game, not liking it as much as, part 1, but being a defender of that game to a degree. But here it's just, it's again, it's not bad. It's just not hitting as hard. And I feel like a little bit of it comes down to the way this show has been structured and the adaptational choices and the characterization choices that they made from Ellie that don't feel like they hit as strong or feel as like they follow through as hard. But then again, maybe that's just bias. And the game has those problems too. But I'd have to go back and replay. So yeah, ultimately, I like the season, didn't love the season. There are some really high highs that are higher than some of, many other shows, even shows that I like generally more. I think the show hits a higher high than most shows do. But on the whole, the season was just kind of fine for me. And this finale kind of epitomizes that kind of fine for me in a way that sort of relates to the structure, pacing, game differences, stuff like that. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts down below. What did you think of this season finale? I'd love to hear what you think. Beyond that, I will see you for the next season. I also have my Doctor Who season finale coming up later this week. Beyond that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper. Mwah.